Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Out of Nowhere. Well, we've got a fantastic guest on my show today. His name is Dennis Carrol. Dennis is a national and international known writer, author, and authority on the occult and folklore. Can we please welcome Dennis to the show? Hello there.
Yeah, all right. It's good to be here. It's a pleasure. And definitely you are interested in the very same topics I am. So it's always good to be able to connect with someone that does that. Definitely.
It is, yeah. Right then, Dennis, welcome to the podcast. For the listeners who may not know you, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what first led you into the world of the paranormal?
Well, I've been interested. I think I cannot remember a time that I was not interested in supernatural things as a kid. But I did have one of my very first supernatural experiences when I was about 14 years of age, where I actually saw some demonic spirits. And the best way I can describe them is they were like soccer-sized, dirty ball light. And when I saw that, it amazed me to no end. I had to figure out what it was I saw. For first off, I didn't really, I kind of really denied seeing it. So did I really see that? It was such a shock to me.
Yeah.
But I finally, had to, own up to it and be honest with myself. Say, yeah, I did see that. So that began my education in that. It lit a fire under me to understand what I experienced and other things. And the thing, Bob, that came to me at that time is something that a question that has haunted me all down through the years, and I have been involved in this for almost 60 years now. And it is a haunting question. If this is real, what else is out there? And that's what I've spent my life looking into it. As an ex-law enforcement officer, I knew the precepts of how to investigate and go about the investigation of things. But there's a difference in just investigating and what I call investigative research. It's where you get deep into your subject and all that. But that's when I began to study about cryptid zoology. I studied demonology. All of it is connected in many different ways. And I told that to somebody else not long ago on a podcast. I said, it's all connected. And they said, well, that is true. But what is the connection? We are the connection. We are the connection to it. That's definitely what's going on with that. But I got into all the many different fields. I tell people I wasn't happy with a slice of the pie. I wanted the whole pie. So I went into demonology, UFOlogy, cryptozoology, ghost research. I like to call it spirit research instead of ghost hunting, which I think it's kind of a term that's been done to death. But I call it spirit research, spiritual research, and that, and earth mysteries. So I went into every avenue of it that I could possibly get into. And demonology, of course, is a fascinating aspect of it is, and it has a lot of definite connections with that. But I call myself an old monster hunter from way back because my very first case is, I was about 15 years old, was actually investigating a werewolf sighting. So that was one of the kind of thing that, my baptism by fire, you might say, that I got into, doing monster hunting. And on my next book, I'm working on a book called Paracryptidology, because the fields of the paranormal and cryptozoology have now kind of combined. They've gone together. And whereas they used to be separate, they're not anymore. But the name of my next book is called Paracryptidology, Hunting Monsters and Things of Nightmare. And on the back, I've got a little excerpt that says this: when we were children, we thought that monsters were real. Then we grow up to find out they really are. And sometimes they're us. Yeah, sometimes they're us. So I've done a lot of monster hunting over the years. I've actually been on the trail of vampires, werewolves. Ran into some skinwalkers, as people like to call them, in the the southwestern United States. And then where I live, in the section of the United States where I live on the eastern seaboard, we have the Appalachian Mountains. I can actually see them from my front door. We have a lot of legends and stories of monsters, witchcraft, ghosts, and all that. So it's a very historically paranormal place to exist. So there was definitely a lot of fodder for me to get into with that, and so that was par for the course to me. But I'm also have been a minister for a good many years, because you need to take with demonology, you need to definitely take it from that avenue, because I've had a lot of people, Bob, over the years come to me for help. They had demonological problems. They had things going on. I have actually gone into places that were demonically infested, infestations that were very bad. And I've actually assisted with exorcisms. But most of the time, I would do what we call spiritual cleansings of these places to kind of get rid of the evil spirits that are thereabout. So I don't specialize in exorcism, unless you want to call it location exorcisms, which is another name for that. Yeah, I've done thousands of those, but it is one thing, in my early career, I found out it's one thing to investigate and to understand and accumulate as much knowledge as you can. And that's a good thing, definitely. And I've always been, I say that the day you quit learning is when they shovel dirt in your face, that's it. So I believe in learning and accumulating knowledge, but it's also another aspect of all this, that when people come to you for help, you want to be able to do that. You want to be able to offer them some kind of solution to their problems. So many years ago, I began a paranormal consultation service. And I have done that for many years now, actually, where I've actually consulted with people all over the world about their demonology problems. Yeah. So, and that's when I started my podcast, which actually I call Hunting the Shadows YouTube Podcast Agency. I call it sort of an agency because I also field a lot of paranormal counseling with it. But I want to get the knowledge out there, and I want to be available to help people if I can in that aspect of it.
There's a question here from Dragonborn. How would you classify a demon?
Well, demons are very interesting. Most of the time, we believe that the demons are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim that you hear about in biblical times. These were the product of fallen angels and human women that you read about in the Bible, supposedly. And these beings, the Nephilim, were not supposed to be here. In other words, they were not created under God's authority. And so when they died, they have nowhere to go except they stay here with us. And these are the demonical forces that we supposedly run into. I have actually, Bob, I believe without doubt, they have a network. They're very well communicated, very well organized, very well communicable in many ways. They really know how to communicate with each other. And I'll give you a quick example. I went somewhere and found it was a case where this woman was possessed, and the demon in her knew me. Nobody else knew me there. Okay, the demon in that called me by name, and that kind of whenever you encounter these forces, you learn something new. And I'm going, so this guy knows me from way back. Okay, and they remembered my name, and he even knew stuff about me that nobody there could have possibly known. But they do these things theatrically to freak you out, to scare you, to get you, upset and all that stuff. You got to break that demonic cycle, not let them feed off of fear or negativity that you put out, because that's what they do. They feed off of that.
Yeah. Do you believe that people can accidentally invite or attract negative entities? And if so, how?
Absolutely. I say, as a doctor of metaphysics, I tell a lot of people that, these are spiritual doorways in your life. You've got to be very careful what you invite into your life, the kind of lifestyle you live. And we were talking about earlier before the program, obsession is one of the things that opens the door to possession. And there are other doors, too, that you can open. You can open it with addiction to drugs, alcohol, whatever that situation is, by your very lifestyle, I've actually, Bob, had people come up and ask me, I think I got a curse, doctor. I think my life is cursed. The guy that sells me drugs quit, selling me drugs and all these terrible things. I said, well, no wonder you're cursed. Look at what kind of life you're living here. You're asking for that, But let me say this quick thing about the demons. Okay, they are operating on a low frequency, low vibration level. Whereas then we operate on a higher vibrational level. Yeah. And they want to pull you down to their level. That's what we call possession to a certain degree. They want to get you down there, and it's not where you really belong. And you definitely don't want to be there.
That's true. You have spoken about having a paranormal sighting when you were quite young. What do you remember about that experience?
Well, it happened actually at a church. It was a church service that was going on. And like I said, I was about 14 years old, and I was sitting towards the back. I always been one to sit in the back of the church. And there was something going on at the front. You know, I had just gotten sat down and was sitting there for a few minutes, and I was wondering why the service wasn't started. And there was something going on at the front of the church, and what it was, the piano player was acting very erratically. And the pastor, and I think another layman of the church, they got him down to the altar and were praying for this guy. And the pastor then told everyone, you know, everybody close your eyes, bow your heads and pray with us. You know, I didn't do that. I kept watching. And when that's when I saw those three demonic spirits come out of that man. And they were like I said, they were about the size of soccer balls. And only way I can describe them, dirty balls of light. It was not a brilliant, bright light. It was a dark light kind of a thing. And matter of fact, I told the pastor after that, you know, I saw all three of them come out of the sky and go through the wall right next to him there. And after the service was over, I went up and asked the pastor, I said, look, I saw something, you know. I told him what I saw. He said, well, what you saw were demonic spirits. And that's, you know, and I found out, you know, years later through experience and all that. Like I said, I began very intense studying on this. And every book I could lay my hands on, that was back in the old days before we had computers, which I wish we'd have had then. That was a very big plus if I'd have had that. But I spent a lot of long, lonely hours in the reference rooms of libraries. But they appear that's just one form that they can appear. And I've seen them appear in many different types of forms. I've even seen them look like little children. Yeah.
Right, yeah. There's Mason here. Dr. Carrol, what do you think of the Roman Catholic exorcism rite? Our house here in Plymouth is haunted and we need help.
Well, I think it can be effective, but I do warn you about the Catholic Church. It is a bureaucracy, okay? And it takes them a while to do. It may be years, and when you need help quickly, and I wish I could go there and help you, you need to, address it as quickly as possible, because if you don't do something about the problem, it will compound and get worse. But what you need is probably, I would advise you to get in touch with someone in an evangelical church. But the reason why I say that is that they are more Bible believing and they are more serious about this kind of thing, and they address it a lot more in that realm. So, but and if you're Catholic, you might want to go the Catholic way. That's entirely up to you. That's your choice. But I would say definitely get clergy in there. Clergy of some sort, whatever you need to, whatever your faith is in that situation, that you need help now. You need to address that and not try to go on with it, because it will, just like anything, unfortunately, any bad thing in the universe, it seems like it only gets worse. And definitely it's a spiritual problem, and it needs to be addressed spiritually.
Yeah, we're just saying, Lawson, it was saying, lovely, I can contact the Church of England.
Yeah, Church of England has a lot. It just depends. You got to find clergy that will say, hey, we understand what your problem is and we know what we can do. We're going to help you. I've actually had some ministers tell me, I don't even believe in the personal devil, and I said, well, he believes in you. Definitely. He's real. Okay. Definitely, without doubt. But you got to find the right people to get the job done the right way. Okay. That's the big thing. Yeah.
Exorcist. And there's quite a few. There must be 2 or 3 in the UK now. I used to know one who lived in Briglington, where I live, and unfortunately he's passed away now. But he used to go all over the place.
And that's true, and that's why I say the evangelical church is more open to this. in many ways than some other denominations. It just
Yeah.
depends, though. It really depends on the pastor and clergy themselves, how they feel about it.
When we talk about werewolves and things like that, what do you believe a werewolf actually is?
Well, there are many different types of werewolves, Bob, actually. There in the Appalachian Mountains, there's a lot of legends of witches who can turn into big black cats. And I'm not talking about house cats here. I'm talking some things that look very much like jaguars or panthers. I've actually been on the trail of some of these things and know people who have seen them. And they're not supposed to be there. I've talked to a lot of forest rangers. They say, "Oh no, there's no such thing here." But I've got a lot of evidence contrary to that. But this is a rite, a ritual in dark, evil witchcraft that you can take on these. You can take on this shape shifting ability, and this is one type of werewolf. It is the one that wants to be a werewolf. And when you run into this, I'm going to say this, and a lot of people ask me this question. You hear a lot about dogman, and there is a big difference between dogman and a werewolf. Dogman is dogman 24/7, all the time. Werewolf, on the other hand, could be the guy that bags your groceries at the supermarket or your next door neighbor. You never would know unless you found out the hard way. But the werewolf is very dangerous. For the fact is, dogman, you might cut you a break and you walk away from that and live to tell about it. I saw a werewolf once, and the only reason why I can tell you this today is because he didn't see me. Because a werewolf will not cut you a break. It is a beast, an alpha killer predator, a psychotic killer. And when it will kill you, tear you into pieces, and eat you and spit you out just for meanness. So that's what a real werewolf is. And it can either run on all fours, and most of the time it will, or it can stand up like a man and operate that way as well. That is the traditional European werewolf, that we know. And it is brought about by dark magic. You've got to sell your soul to do that, okay? And that's what that basically is. And here's the bad thing about it. Once you do this, you go into this process. Every time you change back to human, it becomes harder and harder. You lose more and more of your humanity as it goes along. And eventually, one day, you're stuck in that form, whatever it may be. That's just the way that works. It eventually eats your soul up, and you're no longer human. When you no longer have a soul, you're really no longer human. And I've run into people like that, okay? And some of them are serial killers, definitely. I've met a few in my time. But whenever your soul is gone, you're a lost soul. You're really no longer human. It's like C.S. Lewis once said, when you run into something that looks human but is not, or something that once was human and is no longer human, keep a hand on your hatchet.
God. Yeah, there's quite a few sightings around this area where I live of werewolves, and they have been for the last, I'm going to say, 7 or 8 years.
Well, there are other types of werewolves. There are people that don't want to be werewolves. They have the werewolf curse. It can be passed down through bloodlines, or it can be put upon them by witchcraft, unwanted witchcraft, that they didn't want it themselves. It can be brought about that way. These people do not turn fully, completely, 100% into a wolf like a true werewolf. They still have the attributes of a man. Okay, like say if Bob, you were to turn into a werewolf, we could still tell it was you to a certain degree. But it's not really going to be you anymore. Like you have an animal's body, but you still got the mind of a man. This is what makes the werewolf so downright dangerous. You're dealing with a psychotic beast that will hunt you down and kill you no matter what. They make the perfect assassin, by the way. It will hunt you down and do that. I mean, once against your scent, it will not quit till it unalives you. That's just the way it works. And during search, there have been, over the years, witchcraft wars. And witch covens have actually sent werewolves after each other because, like I said, they're perfect assassins. They're not going to give up till they get the job done. But there are some poor and unfortunate people out there who are werewolves and don't want to be werewolves, or it's a curse, or it's in their bloodline,
I'm going to
or
say,
it's been brought about by witchcraft.
I'm going to
Yeah.
say that. Do you think it's in their bloodline where it comes a time in their life where they'll change into a werewolf?
Yeah, you can. Well, in many ways, you got to understand this is a darkness. And we got to understand that there is a human darkness in all of us. You know, as we used to say in law enforcement, there's a killer, a murderer in everybody. There's a murderer there. Under the right circumstances, you will commit murder. Okay. Everybody can do that. We have a darkness in us, but there's another darkness in this world that seeks to hook up with that darkness in us and expand upon it, make it worse, and it takes over us. This is where demonic possession comes in. And let me tell you this: a true 100% werewolf is someone who is 100% demonically possessed with the spirit of a werewolf, the evil spirit of a werewolf. Ed Lorraine Warren actually had a case one time. I think it was in England, where this man would actually change almost into a werewolf. He was not a full-blown werewolf. Okay, he was a wolf man. That's the difference, in that. But he actually tore a steel door off of a jail cell during one of his transformations. This is a demonic power. And let me tell you a quick difference between a regular spirit, what you might think a human spirit could do. It might move a piece of paper or turn a flashlight on. A demonic spirit will throw that table through the wall. That's how strong and how powerful they can be. And if you've got something like that inside of you, you are no longer human per se, like you and me. You are definitely a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah. Steph's in chat room said, in your opinion, is there any such thing as a benevolent cryptid rather than a malevolent one?
Well, I believe there can be. Bigfoot is the perfect example of that to a certain extent. I've actually met Bigfoot face to face. I actually saw Bigfoot face to face one night in the forest, and he was about as surprised as I was to see me. Okay, but I was close enough that I could have reached out and touched him, and I could smell him. I could feel the heat off of this guy, and he was every bit of he was over 8 foot tall and very muscular. And he does not, by the way, look like a monkey or an ape. Okay, he had more features of a man looking about him, but just a very hairy kind of man. And of course, in the European tradition, there is, Bigfoot's always been known as the wild man. You hear a lot of those traditions about that. You see it on the crests of certain families and stuff, European families and all that. So this is something that we've lived with all of our, existence. And he was kind of benevolent to me. He didn't tear me apart. He wasn't mean to me. He let me walk away from the experience. And I only got to see him for just a moment. He walked behind a very large oak tree in front of me, and he was gone. I mean, supernaturally gone. I cannot figure out how he disappeared to this day. And I've had a lot of people. I looked up in the tree. I looked for a hole in the ground. I mean, he was gone. And a lot of people to this day conjecture that this guy is spiritual, has a spiritual nature, and is using some kind of portaling going on here. That he's actually transcending reality in some way. I don't know. I kind of feel that's what happened with that. But it was so very quick, and I wanted to see more of him, unfortunately. But he had a look almost, I'm not going to say quite like a surprised look on his face. But when he saw me and I saw him, and I stood up and walked towards him, and most people said they would have run. No, I was going to walk towards him. I wanted to see more of him, and I walked over there, and I was very close to him. And he kind of put one arm around the oak tree and stepped in behind it like that, and he was just looking at me all the same time, and he kept his eye on me. And of course, I had my eye on him, and just that quick. It was just like a flash of lightning. He was gone.
Could you smell him?
That was what it was. I had been reading some about how they hunted the big tigers in India and stuff like that. And I had 2 other guys with me that night, Bob. And I said I had been reading about that, and I said we were deep in the woods. I mean, in the middle of the real nowhere. Okay, absolutely nothing. And you don't know how dark it gets in a place like that. You're used to city lights and all that. You cannot hardly see your hand in front of your face. So I had a night vision scope. Okay. So I sent one guy down to my left, down deep into the forest. And I sent the other guy down to my right. And I said, what we do, maybe flush something out, you know. And sure enough, it worked because I'm sitting there and I sit down. It took maybe 5 or 10 minutes. Nothing happened. I could hear them going further on down deep in the woods. So I couldn't see their flashlights anymore. And they were gone. It was maybe 10, 15 minutes. And I kind of sat on a log and I had been looking around with the night vision scope. And it will hurt your eye. It will hurt your eye in a little while because it's, they're kind of very bright, And then you're in extreme darkness. Like I said, I could not really see my hand in front of my face. There was no moon or anything that night. So anyway, I hear something, and that's when I raised the night vision scope up, and I see him, and he's walking towards me. I'm seeing him, and he pushes aside, sort of like a 6-foot sapling, and he steps into like this little clearing where, and that's when I stood up. Is when he saw me, and I was still looking at him with the I guess he didn't know what the scope was, or he thought that was weird looking at whatever the situation. It has a red light on it too, by the way. And I was looking at him. I said, and I was just astonished. And somebody said, "Why didn't you take a picture?" I said, "That was the last thing I was thinking about. I was kept looking at it, so intensely,
It always happens like that.
And I stepped towards him, Bob, and it wasn't. I was very close to him when I first saw him, maybe 3 feet from him when I stopped. And that's when he kind of went around. He looked at me, eye to eye. Well, down at me. He was 8 foot. He was over 8 foot. Eye to eye. And he went right behind that tree, and that was it. The last time I saw him.
Yeah.
I could smell him, though. I could smell. The smell lingered after that. And he doesn't know. It's very, though I know now why they call him the skunk ape, because it does smell like a skunk a little bit. But I was close enough. I could feel heat off of this guy. And it was in the summer, too. I guess he might have been, sweating a little bit or whatever. But all that hair, he had to be sweating a little bit. But, and his hair was sort of a cinnamon brown color. It was not a dark brown, it was not a light brown. It's sort of in between. And it was kind of long in some places and short in other places. And on his face, that's what I've told people when I could see of the face. And like I said, it's very quick, I didn't get a chance to really study it the way I'd love to study it.
No.
But it looked like a man's face to a certain extent, but just like, like these depictions you see of Neanderthals a little bit. It looked a little bit like that. I could see, but it was just like he had very long hair under his cheeks and all that. And it looked, under the best description, you've seen these people with that, I cannot think of the disease where they have long hair on their body, all over their body. That's what this guy looked like. And I told somebody, if I had a gun scope on him and could have shot, I said, I would have thought twice about shooting this because he looked too much human in some ways. I would not want to kill this thing because I feel like it would be like murder. Definitely.
Of course it would. Yeah. I've heard lots of stories about that, saying they look very human. I didn't want to shoot it, but I was frightened of it. And next minute, it just vanished. Is it interdimensional? That's why it just goes around 1 minute back to the tree, and then they go to the tree and it's vanished. It's gone.
The only explanation I can come up with on that is it had to be some type of a portal activity, some type of moving into different realities, or whatever you want to say it, dimensional travel of some sort. Because it was just gone that very quick. There's no way, because I could see down in the woods. I could see all around this tree. It wasn't that thick. It wasn't like a jungle, But it's kind of thick brush, but not real thick. But there was no way you could have got away down through there without me at least seeing his trail, because that was where he went. And the other guys they were coming back not long after this, they could smell him. They could still smell the smell lane, and they said, "Yeah, we smell it," And there's definitely something happened here, They really got them because they didn't get to see it like I did. But that was just, I had seen him several times at a distance on different times, because I've done a lot of Bigfoot hunting, dogman hunting, and all that stuff. I had seen him at a distance, but this is what I really wanted, was a close-up look, and I finally got it, but unfortunately it wasn't long enough. But that you got to take what you get, I guess.
Yeah, I know. You have had paranormal experiences connected with hospitals. What can you tell us about those encounters?
Well, uh, I have actually, I've had several encounters over the years with many different type of supernatural entities out there. Like I say, I actually have had death curses put on me by witches and warlocks. I've encountered them. I've encountered skinwalkers. I'll tell you a quick story about that. I had been in the mountains of North Carolina, and I think I'd been there with like a church group, and I think I was about 16 years old. And me and another guy went out walking that night. Everybody went to bed in the camp, and this other guy went out walking, just exploring around a little bit. I guess we weren't sleepy, and we came across a dirt road, and this is deep in the Appalachians now. And I come across this dirt road, and we started up, and I think we were like, there was a town back over there. We were going to walk over to that town and come back, and then go to bed or something. And we come up on this crossroad up in the mountains, crossroad like a dirt road going up the mountain with a crossroad. And I'm standing there talking. He might have been smoking or something. I was standing there talking to him, and all of a sudden I hear this whippoorwill whistle, okay, which is a bird in the South that you hear a lot, the whippoorwill. And I said, wow, that sounded very close. And I told the boy I was with, I said, watch this. And I imitated the whistle,
Yeah.
And sure enough, it answered me back. And I said, and it was across the road, and it's like it's a copse of trees over there, And I said, well, let's walk over there a minute and see if we can see this, I thought it was a bird. I didn't know I was being set up. Okay. What happened was, soon as he and I walked into this shadow of these trees, two people came out behind us. One of them put a knife at my throat, and the other one did the same thing to the guy with me. And it was a woman. And she spoke, and she said, tell me why I shouldn't cut your throat right now. And I said, well, I can think of a lot of good reasons not to do that. So I started very quickly trying to talk myself out of this situation. And she kind of laughed a little bit and took the knife down. There were two Cherokee women. They were two sisters. One of them was a little bit taller than the other. And I remember they had kind of a strange smell about them. It wasn't that they may have been drinking alcohol, and I think maybe that'd been part of it, but they had sort of a woodsy-like smell about them, like a wood, they'd been around a wood fire or something. Right. I later found out it was some type of ritual smell that they have out. That comes from rituals they did. But anyway, make a long story short, we kind of talked to these women. I was trying to get away from them. I mean, anybody that holds a knife on you, you don't need to hang around with, And so we were trying to get out of this situation. The boy was scared to death. The boy I was with, he was about a year younger than me. He was just froze up. He's scared to death. I don't know if he wet himself or what. But anyway, he was scared to death. And so I was talking to the girl, and the girl said, what? Said, you're not supposed to whistle at night in these mountains? I said, yeah, I think I heard something about that, but I thought you were a bird. She said, well, that's a bird call. I can do a lot of bird calls. She said, we talk to each other that way. It says weird, starts talking weird stuff here, And finally I said, well, we got to probably go, it's getting late, to get out of here, and it's a good meeting and all that. She said, before you go, we want to show you something.
Ooh.
And I said, well, what do you want to show me? And she said, well, you stay right here, and you watch those bushes across the road right there. And if you don't go anywhere, you stay here and watch those bushes. So her and her sister, well, like I said, she's a little bit taller, maybe about a head taller than her sister. Okay.
Right.
And they both walk into those bushes over there. Now, we had come up the road. We didn't go, through a forest or anything.
No.
And so he walked over those bushes, and they went into bushes. The bushes shake, were shaking a little bit. And it might have been like 3 or 4 minutes. And I turned to the boy, I said, let's get out of here. I don't know where they went to get more liquor or whatever they're going to do here. I don't know. And by the time I said that, the boy with me said, look. I looked over there, and 2 wolves stepped out of those bushes.
Oh, my God.
I mean, big wolves. One of them was bigger than the other wolf. And they looked at us, and then turned and went on up that road, and turned at the top of the road, looked back at us. Their eyes were red. Okay. And I'm sitting there going, what are we seeing here? And the boy said, did they turn into that? And I said, come on, this has got to be some kind of trick. This is not real. And they were gone, and I walked over there and I said, they got to be in those bushes hiding out. They let their dogs out. They didn't. There couldn't have been wolves. There's not supposed to be any wolves at that time in those mountains. Okay, because most all of them had been killed out. I walk over there, Bob, and I part those bushes, and I part it, and I'm looking like about a 30-foot drop off the side of the mountain. There's no way that they didn't come back out of those bushes. There's no way down out there. And I look at that boy, I said, the boy says, let's get out of here. And he would never talk about that after that. Now, he's gone now. He's passed away now. But after that, I tried to get him to talk a couple of times about that. And it would not. He said, I don't want to think about it. Because we actually saw what we saw. They were definitely what you would call skinwalkers. Without a doubt.
Sounds like it.
Mm-hmm.
That must have been frightening at that age.
But it kind of shook me up. I mean, but like I said, I've already, saw some stuff that I, already experienced. I'd already began deep study into these things. And I said, well, that's just something else that's out there, evidently. But, I found out later on through more study and research what these things were. We didn't call them skinwalkers back then. We call them witches, which is what they are. And whatever name you want to give them, if they're European witches, or if they're Southwestern United States witches, or if they're Mexican witches, whatever. Witch is a witch, and they supposedly have a shape-shifting ability. Most all supernatural beings, and I'm doing a lecture series right now, as a matter of fact, every Saturday night on my channel. Most supernatural beings have the ability to shapeshift. That includes angels as well.
I'd like to talk a bit about vampires and Highgate Cemetery.
Actually, yeah, they are definitely the Highgate Cemetery vampire is very interesting. I think a little bit of that may have been hysteria, sort of a public hysteria thing, but something I believe eventually, actually to begin with, was saw there, was seen by this man that all that got started. But I think it got a little bit out of proportion when the public got a hold of it. To a certain extent, and people were like passing out or claiming to be scratched and doing all kinds of stuff. But that does also tie into demonic activity to a certain extent. But let me say this, Bob. I've had a lot of people come to me over the years, say, Doctor, where can I go find some demons at? I said, well, the basic number one place if you want to find them are cemeteries and graveyards, places of the dead. This is where they hang out. They're drawn to that like iron to a magnet. They love places of trauma. Some of the most haunted places, and I worked in one for 30 years, can be hospitals and can be, morgues. They can be battlefields. Wherever trauma and death and blood has been spilled and pain has been experienced, you will find demonic entities. They are drawn to it. And it would not surprise me if something like that was not at Highgate Cemetery. More than that, there may be something else besides that at work there too. But there are definitely demonic spirits. And that's why I warn a lot of people. I used to teach classes out in cemeteries on this kind of thing. Over the years, I've mentored a lot of groups and all. And I warn you, if you ever go, and everybody listening today, if you ever go to the cemetery, do not ever bring anything back from the cemetery. It's not a good idea not to bring anything back, because a lot of times, a lot of cursed items are left. We call them spell traps. They're left by dark warlocks and witches in cemeteries for you to pick up and take home with you. And believe me, you do not want that going home with you.
Oh, no. Don't want an attachment. Definitely.
Right, exactly right. And, over the years, I've had a lot of people in groups come to me. I would not go in. If I were to go to Highgate Cemetery today, I would say a prayer of protection before I went in and coming out. That's what you got to do in certain circumstances to safeguard yourself and the people with you. And that's why I tell, I've had a lot of groups over the years. If people wanted to let their children investigate with them, I said, oh, no, absolutely not. Children should not be involved in this kind of thing because they're very impressionable. They're very open to this stuff, and they can also pick up attachments very easily if they're not careful. So it's not a good idea to let children do that. But when it comes to demons, they can inhabit these places, but they can end up anywhere. They can be at crossroads. They can be in what we call liminal places. Now, liminal are what we call the in-between worlds places, mountain tops or mountain passes and bridges, places like that. These are in-between places. And that's where dark spirits are drawn to that as well. But vampires are definitely evil spirits, but they're different kind of vampires. A lot of people don't understand. So you've got human vampires and you've got inhuman vampires.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that's a question I get a lot, and a lot get mad at me. Are you saying all witches are evil? No, everyone's evil out there. But you got to remember this about witchcraft. It usually all comes from the same place. It's coming from the same source. Okay. So you got to be careful what you do with it. But witchcraft is not a religion. It is a profession. And just like, I can build you a house with a hammer, or I can kill you with a hammer. It depends on who's using the tool, a lot of times, definitely. But let me get back to vampires a moment. Vampires are fascinating because I've run into a lot of them over the years. Actually, I've done some vampire hunting myself. But you got to remember, the human and the inhuman vampire are two completely different things. And you got to throw Hollywood out the window. Okay, you got to forget about the movies here. Okay. The real true vampires, they can walk around in daytime. Okay, I've actually encountered one in daytime. They can do that. I'll tell you a story in a minute about it. One I met in a cemetery, of course, of all places. Surprise, surprise. But anyway, they can do things other than what Hollywood, tells about them. But most of the time, your inhuman vampire is actually this. Listen very closely. It is a demonically reanimated corpse. That's an inhuman vampire. So, in other words, if I were to come back as a vampire, I would not be Dennis Carrol. I would be the body of Dennis Carrol, but Dennis Carrol is not in there anymore. It is now reanimated by demonic spirits.
Right.
This is what goes on. And most of the time, according to Hollywood, they do not go after your blood. They're going after your soul essence, the essence of your life source. They go after that other than blood. Of course, they will take blood too. That's part of the spiritual part of it. But most of the time, they're taking blood for the ritual of it. And that gets deep into the study of vampires, but we'll do that some other day. But that's what's going on with that. And as the Bible says, the blood is the life. And there's some kind of mystical, spiritual attachment with our blood to our body. And of course, look at it. Look at the blood. It's all in our body. It is us. Okay. We can't live without our blood, definitely, So that is a mystical part of it. But I have known energy vampires to do that. Now, these are inhuman vampires. And if I were to come across an inhuman vampire, I would stake it down. And you can even stake it with an iron stake. I would stake it down, but that's not where it ends. That's the beginning. You stake it, you cut his head off, and then you burn it to ashes. That's the only way you can absolutely destroy a vampire or a werewolf, actually. It's not just a silver bullet with a werewolf. You could also use a silver knife on a werewolf. You could use silver. Now, silver supposedly will do things to vampires, but that's not in folklore. That's Hollywood to a certain extent. You got to be careful with that, okay? Oh, but the thing that works against vampires is what we call the application of decapitation and then the immolation of fire. You burn it to ashes. That's the only way you can finally get rid of it so it won't come back. And there's a tale of a vampire in Ireland, which probably was the precursor with Bram Stoker. I interviewed his nephew, by the way, very, very nice guy. Okay. Bram Stoker knew this story about the Abertosh, the vampire of Abertosh, where he was a very evil man. And when he died, they buried him, and he kept coming back. And he would be taking people's blood and doing some bad things. And finally, a vampire hunter showed up, and the vampire hunter told him, "Oh, you're doing this all wrong. No wonder he keeps coming back. You've got to bury him upside down with a big rock on him." And so supposedly that's where he's at to this day. He never came back after that. But that's the legend in Ireland. But Bram Stoker knew about this story, definitely. I'm sure he did. That had to be a little inspiration for Dracula. But you have the inhuman vampire. That's what you do with them. And I would not advise doing that to a human vampire because that would be murder. Okay, that's against the law. You have to deal with human vampires on a case by case basis. There's no blanket thing on it, but you can protect yourself. And the two main ways you can protect yourself from human vampires is one, don't associate with them, don't hang out with them, don't mess around, don't buddy with them, stay away from them. That's one way. And another way is to never ever let them, under any circumstances, touch you. Okay, and I don't know if you know this or not, Bob, but in dark witchcraft, you can speak a spell or a curse into your hand and touch someone with it. It's theirs. So be very careful. And I warn people about this. You have a personal space for a reason. I call it a spiritual buffer zone around you.
Yeah.
And you got to be very careful who you let in that and who you let touch you, and food that you eat from people. And things and gifts they give you. Because if I were to give you a curse today, Bob, it's yours. You own it. Until you at least pass it to someone else, which is not nice. Or you get God to break it. The power of God breaks spells and curses like that. That's the only way you're going to get rid of that curse. But I warn you, the best thing is don't take it to start with. That's like your mom and dad told you when you were little, don't take gifts from strangers. There's a reason why. Yeah,
true. Masons, Harry, would you advise us to wear a crucifix when you go out ghost hunting?
I would advise some kind of blessed object. Now, I am wearing a medallion right now. As a matter of fact, it's called the Star of the Seven Archangels. It's kind of a protective thing. Anything that's blessed item that has a prayer set or anything is a very good protective thing, because it's not the item itself, it's your faith that's connecting with it. And and your faith is it's sort of a reminder of your faith. And that kind of puts a little bit more of a protection around you, spiritually speaking. You have to be very careful about who you let into your life. Like I said earlier about demonic possession, you open doors. You got to invite these things in, like the traditional vampire. That's very true. He can't come in unless you invite him. And I've actually gone everywhere I go. When I go to do these location exorcisms, I will stop at the door and say, do you invite me in? And they say, yeah, come on in. That gives me authority there.
Yes.
Yeah, and so I come into the authority of God, of course. I'm not on my own authority, but the vampire's coming in on his authority of darkness once you invite him. That's why it's a good idea not to invite werewolves and vampires into your house. Okay, it's not good, or into your life. And if you are associating with someone like this, be very careful about these people in your life, because they can do some bad things to you. It's just like hanging out with the wrong crowd, especially if they're vampires and werewolves. It's not a good idea.
This is from Dragon. What are your thoughts on Christian witches?
There are no such things. It's an oxymoron. Okay, you can't be a Christian and a witch, and you can't be a witch and be a Christian. Unfortunately, that's the way that goes, according to Orthodox religion. And in demonology backs that up as well. There is really, you can't, as the Bible clearly says, as Jesus once said, you cannot serve two masters. A house divided cannot stand. Satan does not cast out Satan. That's the way that usually works.
What do you personally believe happens to the human spirit after death?
I've had people ask me that over the years. I think without a doubt, death is just the beginning and not the end. I think you definitely survive. I feel, especially as a minister, that we have a body, soul, and spirit. The body one day will go back to where it came from. The meat jacket you and I are wearing now, one day we will put it down. Hopefully later than sooner. We will put it aside. But our immortal spirit, which makes us a living soul, will go on somewhere forever. It is immortal. And the bad thing about it, Bob, a lot of these bad people are chasing immortality in all the wrong ways because they've already got it. But some people are foolishly selling their souls, their immortal souls, for something they already have. They're being lied to. I call it the big lie. They're buying the lie that the darkness puts out.
After everything you have experienced from your childhood sighting to your experience with spirits, hospitals, Bigfoot, and the unexplained, what do you believe is really happening?
Well, I don't believe that, like the human spirit itself, when you die, you're going to hang around for several years and all that. I believe you kind of go on to your reward. The Bible specifically does say, it is appointed unto man once to die, and then the judgment. There are other spirits out there walking around, though. And I'll tell people a lot of times, surprise, surprise, demons are ghosts and ghosts are demons. That's the same thing. And I've had a lot of demons try to fool me into believing that they were human spirits, which they are not. You got to be very careful about that because they are lying spirits. You cannot believe anything a demon tells you, because you can take it to the bank as a lie. Definitely, it may look like the truth, but it's usually a lie at the core of it. That's the way these guys operate. And I had an old exorcist, tell me once many years ago, don't listen to them and don't believe anything they tell you. That's the way you got to handle them. But now, human spirits, I will tell you this, it's something freaky. I found evidence that if you die demonically possessed, you may be held back from going wherever it is you're going by those demonic spirits. You're still under bondage to them to a certain extent. We don't know how long, actually, philosophically speaking, how long that's going to go on. But I don't think it goes on that long. They don't have that much power over things for that length of a time. But there's a lot of evidence for that. But it's, I think, more rare than people realize, more than Hollywood, and definitely in sort of ghost hunters would want you to believe. It's a more rare thing than it is a prevalent thing. Most of the time, people get mad at me for saying this, but I found this out after 60 years of doing this. I can tell you without doubt, most of the time, those ghosts are demons. That's what they are, unfortunately. But, all of these things, things of the supernatural and the paranormal. You got to remember this: as a doctor of metaphysics, I became a doctor of metaphysics to understand how the unseen and the seen interact. I wrote a book called The Road Unseen, a paranormal journey into high strangeness. And the attributes in this world, you're existing here with two dimensions: the physical reality and the spiritual reality. The spiritual reality is just as real as the physical, although you can't see it. Just like the wind or like microbes and germs, you can't see them, but they are definitely real.
Yeah. This is from Dragon. If Christians go on to their reward, what about everyone else? Where do they go?
Well, I think if you're going to talk about hell, I think you're looking at more like I would say, kind of like a waiting room for the final day of judgment, when everybody will stand before the judgment bar on that day. And I think some people go to that waiting room, but as the thief on the cross was told, this day you will be with me in paradise. There's a good waiting room and a bad waiting room kind of a thing going on. I don't believe in a purgatory since I'm not Catholic, but they believe there's an in-between in that too, and you can be prayed out of it, which I don't believe either, but I'm just getting into theology here. But anyway, the whole thing is, I believe there's a holding place for the good guys and a holding place for the bad guys. And I call it sort of a rest for the good guys, and it may not be such of a rest for the bad guys, because, but it just depends. We understand in religion, and I tell people this a lot, you've got to stay under the Spirit of God, the grace of God, but you got to be under the blood of Jesus Christ as well. If you have both of these areas of your life covered, what are you worried about? You don't have anything to worry about. But if you don't, then you're outside the grace of God. You're outside the will of God. You're not doing what God wants you to do. You're not following the precepts of God. You may have a problem with that when you die, definitely. But where it is, I have not been there. I can't tell you for sure. I don't think I want to go there either, to hell, that is. But the Bible does not a lot of times speak of a burning, tormenting type hell. It kind of speaks of a place of the dead, a place of darkness. And we do know certain fallen angels are reserved under chains of darkness in that place until the day of judgment, supposedly.
Right, there's a question from Leslie. It is said that the best trick the devil ever made was to convince people that he doesn't exist. What's your view on this?
I agree with that completely. I believe that without a doubt, that's one of his number one tricks. He's very good at illusions. He does a lot of smoke and mirror stuff better than David Copperfield. Okay, he's very good at it to get people to believe what he wants them to believe. We call this, the vampires have that ability too. They have the ability, what we call the glamour. They can get you to see what they want you to see. Satan is the same way. He uses the glamour on us too, and so do fallen angels and demons too, to a certain extent. This is another supernatural power. They get you to believe things they want you to believe. But I've actually had pastors and clergymen say, I don't believe in a personal devil. I would say, well, he believes in you. But that's his power. Cotton Mather, I think, was a very famous preacher many years ago. He was a witch hunter too, by the way. He said something very interesting. He said the power of the devil is that no one will believe in him. And that's where his power lies. If you don't believe in your enemy, he's got you.
Right, yeah. We've got about 4 or 5 minutes left. If someone's listening has experienced something they cannot explain, what advice would you give them?
Well, definitely contact someone like me. If it's not me, someone like me, someone that's in the know. I'm somewhat of an authority on the occult as well. You need to find someone who has that knowledge. And of course, that, by the way, that word occult means hidden knowledge. Basically, you got to, connect with someone that's got the knowledge to know what's going. I say this a lot, Bob. Knowledge is power, and the power is yours.
Yeah.
And that power can help you with your life if you apply it the right way. I used to have an old teacher many years ago. She said something very interesting to me. It's always, rung true with me. She said, now that you have learned what you have learned, now you must apply it correctly. And that's what you need to do. If you have a problem, find a person that can help you solve that problem, whatever it may be, whether it's a spiritual or whatever kind of problem it may be. That's why I started a paranormal consultation service many years ago. I don't charge anyone for it, but I just put it out there to help people, that come to me. And they have come to me from all over the world with these problems. I've had cases in India, China, Brazil, all over the different parts of the world, Germany, where people have these demonological problems, whatever their belief system may be. They know these evil spirits are real and they are out there. By whatever name you want to call them, jinn or Vorvalikas or whatever you want to give them the name. That's the Greek name for them, by the way. Whatever name you give these evil spirits, they are real, just as real as you and I, because that dimension of the spiritual is just as real as our dimension of the physical. And sometimes they come into our reality. Definitely, without a doubt. I've seen them do it.
Finally, Dennis, after everything you have seen and experienced, what do you believe is the greatest mystery we still don't understand about our world?
I think the greatest mystery of all that we need to solve is right here in the human mind and how we react to the things that are around us and how we deal with it. I think the frontiers of the human mind are the last great frontier we face. And of course, space is too. And I was telling somebody the other day, there's a whole lot of the oceans. We don't know what's in them. And definitely we do not know what's under our feet. There is more to this world than we truly realize. And until we open ourselves up to that, our dim view of these things is going to be very limited. And we don't need to be limited in a universe of unlimited proportions.
Right, we're just about run out of time, basically. Where can people get your books?
Okay, you can find them on Barnes and Noble and also on Amazon. Just look up the author, Dennis W. Carrol. I had to put the W in there. There's a football player in Australia named Dennis Carrol, and I don't play football. Okay, but anyway, you can find it there. And also you can find it on my website, DennisWCarroll.com. And if you need to contact me, you can reach me at DennisWCarroll.com. And also, you can come over to my channel and check out my shows. I have a lot of shows over there. It's called Hunting the Shadows YouTube podcast channel and agency. And I think so far I'm doing about 6 or 7 shows a week here over there. So come and check me out. I'd like to have you on the show one day, Mo.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah. Let's just say, all the warmongers in government owned by the devil, or is it just collective wickedness?
I think without a doubt there are forces in our government that are definitely in bed with the demonic. Let me tell you a quick story. Many years ago, I was contacted by the CIA. It was the real deal. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't, it wasn't a foul.
Yeah.
It's the real deal. And the guy, all during the interview, and I met him at a local cafe, and we had an interview. He kept asking me demonological questions. How do you raise demons? What do you do if you raise a demon? What if you do with it? I mean, all kinds. I mean, way out stuff. But finally, I had to say, why do you need to know this? And I never did say that. I never did ask him that outright. I wondered about it, but I said, and it occurred to me, hey, they're dealing with this stuff. They're messing around with this kind of stuff. And he did say one thing to me at the end of the interview. He said, "How would you like to come to work for us?" He said, "We like people who have supernatural talents." And I said, "Well, I think, again, I'm busy with a book. I'll get back to you on that one day." I didn't really want to hook up with the CIA because most of the time their retirement plan comes through the morgue.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
There you go, missing.
But that kind of opened my eyes to realize, Bob, they're definitely in bed with a lot of the wrong things out there. It would not surprise me if cryptids like Bigfoot, dogmen, werewolves, vampires are not employed by the CIA, no doubt about it, or the equivalent in Britain or anywhere else in the world, because the number one thing governments always seek to do, weaponization of everything they get their hands on.
Oh, definitely.
That includes that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
What day do you do your podcast on?
I'm sorry, what?
What day do you do your podcast?
Okay, well, I do my podcast on Monday night. On Monday mornings, I have a program called Monday Morning Monsters at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We do nothing but wall-to-wall cryptids on that. And then Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I do Hunting the Shadows and another program I call The Road Unseen. Okay. And then I have on Friday nights, I do 2 other shows. One is just called Paranormal Point of View, and the other is called Darker Than the Dark. And both of those are at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time as well. And on Saturday nights at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'm doing a series of lectures called the Equinox Initiative, Supernatural Spectrum. I'm doing lectures on supernatural beings, what to do if you encounter them, and what they are, and basically their attributes and all that. So it's very interesting lecture series. I love doing lectures. I've done a lot of them over the years, and this is a very perfect forum for that, definitely.
Oh, definitely. Of course it is. Of course it is. Yeah, I'll have to come on your show sometime as well. Mondays would be ideal time, 11 o'clock Eastern, so it'd be 4 o'clock my time in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you decide to do my show, we can always tape it if we need to. We can record it and do it whenever you want, definitely.
Oh, yeah, we can do, yeah. So thank you very much for coming on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Thank you to everybody in the chat room. Rick Allen just said, there's enough in the Bible to reveal God's true identity. He's just come on now. That's last minute. That's Rick Allen for you. Sometimes he's there from the beginning or at the end. But thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you to everybody in the chat room. My guest next Wednesday, that's the 5th of August, is Debbie Monroe. And unfortunately, we're going to do it earlier. We're going to do it at 5 p.m. UK time. she's traveling up and down the country that day. So she wanted me to do it earlier for her. So I said I would do. That's Wednesday, the 5th of August at 5 p.m. Everybody's just saying what a great show it is today with you on, Dennis. So that everybody seems to have had a great time. And then on Friday, next Friday, the 7th of August, is Daryl Sims, the alien hunter. He's a great guy, is Daryl. I've interviewed him quite a few times over the years, but he's always a great guy to interview as well. That's the 7th, Friday, the 7th of August, Daryl Sims, also known as the alien hunter. So thank you again. Everybody in the chat. And have a good weekend, everybody. Bye for now.